Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're diving into book 2 of Lord of Mysteries, Circle of Inevitability, specifically the first volume titled Nightmare. Before we start this video, contains spoilers for volume 1. If you haven't read it, I strongly recommend doing that first, because a lot of what I will be saying in this video will be a spoiler to book 1 and book 2 volume 1. So please read both book 1 and book 2 volume 1 before watching this video. Alright, let's get into it. I know this has been a bit longer. It has been very long since I made my last book review, and I'm sorry because I just didn't. I First of all, I did not have time, and I lost a bit of motivation when I was making these videos, because while reading the book took a lot of time, and I became busy and just lost motivation, because I'm inherently a very lazy person. So hopefully you guys forgive me, and let's start again. This is a spoiler warning. There will be spoilers. Let's talk about the overview. Volume 1, Nightmare, basically works as both an introduction and a prologue to the new story. Unlike beginning with the original Lord of Mysteries, which slowly introduces Klein and the world of Beyonders, this volume mainly focuses on Lumion Lee as the new main character of this book, setting him up as the new protagonist while also planting clues that will become important later in the series. Of course, at first glance, like volume 1, the story seems relatively simple. Lumion lives in a rural village in Intis, not in Lyon. Intis is one of the neighboring countries in this world, with his sister Aurora, and the village appears peaceful on the surface. However, as the story progresses, just like in volume 1 of Lord of the Mysteries, you start noticing that something is deeply wrong. The both protagonists know that something is going deeply wrong with the current affairs of where they're living in. Of course, just like every single volume that Cuttlefish wrote in book 1, book 2 also has a similar title theme. That the name of the title is basically what the theme, and has to do something with the plot of the whole volume. And Nightmare, in my opinion, fits the best as the title for this book, this volume, because it's not just symbolic. Those who have read this volume would also know that the whole freaking structure is basically a whole big nightmare. Like, as told in the final chapter, the whole plot takes place in a dream. The whole thing is basically a dream. One could say even Lumion's nightmare, because of his other issues that would be discussed in later volumes, but the takes place in a nightmare of Lumion that Lumion himself has created. What makes this interesting is the narrative is built from three overlapping layers. Like, three layers are most important. Like, three things that are most important that tell us this is the time loop, and as I was saying, the three things that lead us to this whole thing, that clue us in that this is a dream, are three things. It's the time loop itself, the Force being there. Force is one of the characters that is basically sort of acts as a mentor to Lumion in a whole of volume 1. Force being there, and the dream sequence, that when Lumion goes to sleep and wakes up in his quote unquote dream. These three basically clue us in that something is not right, specifically with this village, and this being a nightmare and just the sorts. Of course, these are deliberate clues that have been given to us by Cuttlefish. I hope so, because I might be analyzing deep into it, but like, these are very basic facts of the volume itself. I am not really going too deep into them. Of course, now that we have gone over the general overview of the volume, let's talk about some pros and cons of the story. I'll start with positives, as I do always. One of the things that I most like about this volume was Lumion is actually a really solid introduction as a new main character. replacing a protagonist after a very long book as LOTM one was is always very very difficult. Of course, even now most people really do not like Lumion as a main character. One of the biggest reasons being that Klein wasn't one, or any previously known character wasn't the main POV of the book two. But in my opinion, he is someone as memorable as Klein. I think one of the major reasons why I like Lumion as well was because he does stand on his own very quickly. Like, he isn't just Klein 2.0. He is his own set of character with his own sort of quirks and character flaws. Like, he's reckless, emotional, and much more impulsive than Klein was, because Klein was very, I would say, I wouldn't want to say this, but he was pretty boring, man. Like, he wasn't as reckless. He was pretty safe whenever he was planning something. And Lumion is much more reckless and emotional than Klein ever was, which does create a very different dynamic in the books, and with his people that he talks to, which is always interesting to see from a different POV. Because of these quirks, the story does feel more chaotic and fun, which in my opinion fits well for the tone of Circle of Inevitability. The second thing I really like about the book is the side characters are surprisingly strong. In my opinion, the side characters here feel immediately more interesting than many of the early characters we met in the first volume of the original series. Not necessarily deeper, I would say, but definitely more colorful and memorable right away from the start. Some of them have strong personalities, fun accents that distinguish them, or motivations, in my opinion, that makes you curious about them. Of course, this doesn't include major characters from the original series like Dunn, Eggers. What was his teacher's name? I forgot his teacher's name. Isaac Eggers, and Leonard. These were three were, in my opinion, and O'Neill. Were these four or so characters, in my opinion, were a much more highlight and interesting than book two characters. But even then, I like a lot of book two characters, specifically Lumion, his sister, the madam, the three help from the Intis government, and Force is a book one character. I didn't like her in this one, but yeah, uh, the three help from the Intis government that came here, and Lumion's friend Raymond, I believe. Like, I actually did like him, and did want him to be more of a recurring character, but we all know what happened to him. Third, the pacing. This volume feels noticeably faster than the beginning of the original series. The plot moves more quickly, mysteries appear early, and the tension builds much faster. Instead of spending a long time slowly building the setting like the first book did, the author jumps into the strange events surrounding Cordo village fairly quickly. For readers who thought the beginning of the original series was a bit slow, this change in pacing will probably feel like a big improvement, since most of the setting has already been done in book one. So a setting doesn't need to be done in book two. However, as we are moving on to the cons, the author is still prone to information dumps. I know they are less frequent compared to the early parts of the first book, since this is a second book in the season and a lot of the world building has already been established. But like, there are still moments where the story pauses so the author can explain mechanics, background information, or historical details. So, for example, let me tell you, in one of the early series, when Lumion is going through the dream, what he calls the dream, and finds the currency of interest, like, the half a page worth of information we are given about the currency, and what it like, what's the exchange rate is, how valuable it is, and all these, and all the different variations of the book, of the currency. However, problem is, in volume 1 this isn't important. Like, the currency isn't important. We don't really get anything related to currency in book 1, which isn't important. Like, this feels like just giving information for giving information's sake. Like, you didn't need to give us all this information about the currency. The only thing we really needed was how they look. That's somewhat different versions of the currency, and what is it called, that was enough. Like, we didn't need any more than this parts. Which, like, this feels repetitive, because a lot of times he gives author a cut of this does give information later on down the line. Now, on to my next point that I find very bad is the introduction of Tarot Club. Personally, I feel like the Tarot Club, especially first, appears a little too early in the story, in my opinion. Like, there could have been characters used as mentors, like spoilers, because there's a spoiler for later line of the book. But like, it could be used as mentor other than for, like, you didn't need to introduce Tarot Club as a this early. This just creates like the need to escalate, because if Lumion has force, he can call always. Like, the author needs to escalate to problems that force may find problem with, or force cannot directly help him. This does create a problem in book one, because like, there wasn't a need to introduce force this early. Like, just use some other character, man. Now, my final verdict on the book is like, overall, though, despite these small issues, volume 1 is of the Circle of Inevitability is very strong start. Like, in my opinion, is a much stronger start than volume 1 of the original series. Many will not agree with me, but in my opinion, it is a much better, much more compact, and much more interesting start to an arc than volume 1 of LOTM was. Like, it successfully introduces Lumion, establishes the tone of the story, and lays down a lot of the clues that will clearly become important later. And these are that's my review of volume 1 Nightmare. If you read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did you enjoy Lumion as a new protagonist, and what did you think about Kordu Village arc? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you want more content about Lord of the Mysteries and other web novels, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.